Happy Halloween, my friends! I'm back, and hiding behind silly little doodles and working on my campaign book again. I was pretty torn as to what I should do for Halloween on my channel because I already drew monsters, had a 100 subscriber special, which thank you, and did a costume/cosplay episode. How can I up the Halloween vibes from there? The answer is SCLRMB. Our beloved SCLRMB from our Drawing D&D Monsters video is back, and they are going to get a beautiful, fully colored drawing to be put as official content in my D&D book. Are you tired of me working on this campaign book yet? Better not be, cause it's gonna be a while. Anyways, I looked up a couple of references of panthers and hyenas since those are the animals that I took the most inspiration from when designing SCLRMB, who I really need to come up with a better name for. And I started out by really quickly sketching a couple of different scrunkly fellows in various climbing or hunched positions. As I have said many times, animals aren't really my strong suit, so I have a much harder time visualizing what I want when drawing them. Although I must say drawing SCLRMB ended up coming really naturally for me. But of course there were still some hitches when it came to anatomy. But I think this drawing took a little over 3 hours total, which we can either say I'm getting much faster at drawing animals and landscape features, or that my patience runs out much faster while working on animal and plant drawings instead of drawings of people. I'm going to pretend it's the former so I feel better about myself. And I don't remember if I mentioned it in earlier videos, but a lot of my drawings took closer to 4 to 6 hours when I started in June, whereas I feel like I'm churning out much more detailed work now in just 2 to 4 hours. It really goes to show that even if visually you don't feel like there's a lot of improvement going on, there are definitely improvements in other areas like technique or time. I also draw a fourth SCLRMB, but he ended up kind of looking like a pug instead of a slinky, scrunkly creature, so he doesn't stick around for long. Rest in peace, buddy. But yeah, I was pretty much enjoying myself drawing SCLRMB so much that I decided to keep most of the sketches and render these 3 as a pack of SCLRMBs. I've been sort of holding on to this idea for a while, but I've been really wanting to make a nice big drawing that isn't just a landscape for my campaign book, either a large scene from a historical event or just a very colorful big drawing to take up the majority of a page. So here you watch me do a lot of shifting around of the SCLRMBs, and I land on this final arrangement where all of them are along the left side so they can all be mostly fully seen in all their scrunkly glory. As you can see, I also made room for a stat block, which I really wanted to have fleshed out and put in time for the video, but I decided against it just because I didn't want to release stats for a creature that hadn't been playtested in real time. However, I do have a couple of ideas for SCLRMB's ability set. So I've never homebrewed a monster before, so if this sounds way too over the top and crazy, give me time because I'm working on it. I'm looking at something that on its own would be somewhere like a challenge rating of 3, maybe 4, and I know how much of a jump in ability that can be. Like I said, I'm working on it. The creature of course has dark vision, and as far as base stats go, I think Dex and Strength would be the highest, followed by Constitution, because Survival is a wisdom roll, and I don't want SCLRMBs to be fight to the death type creatures. I want them to be at least a little clever and have like ambush tactics or whatnot. And Intelligence and Charisma would probably be in the negatives. I might give them a proficiency in Stealth, or perhaps the Keen Hearing and Smell ability, maybe all of those. Of course the creatures would be able to bite and claw in the event of an attack, and I was thinking of possibly making them resistant to non-magical attacks and maybe fire, because these creatures, spoiler alert, were born out of a mass scorching of land by a goddess of death. So I feel like having a resistance, if not immunity to fire, would be, you know, make sense. I think giving the creatures multi-attack would be fine, granted their biting and clawing were not incredibly overpowered, and I want their movement to be pretty dynamic. I was thinking of giving them the ability to move up and down vertical surfaces relatively easily, and also giving them a lot of jumping power and putting them somewhere between 20 to 30 feet of normal movement. Alright, so if all that wasn't overwhelming enough, I would also like to include a couple of more unique abilities. Perhaps the ability to understand maybe abyssal or infernal, but not be able to speak it back. I also wanted to give more abilities like shadow blend, where it can essentially become invisible in dim light or darkness. I also think it would be cool if the creature had an action ability, kind of like mud breath, except it's like ink breath. The creature being attacked would have to make a dex saving throw or be blinded until the end of SCLRM's next turn, or be restrained for 1 minute or until they succeed on a adequate saving throw. Or maybe these creatures spit out gray ooze, which is an ooze that moves on its own and it corrodes metal of non-magical weapons and armor, and you know, you can lose AC over the course of the battle, and I think that would make life interesting and difficult. So speaking of difficult, this might be getting out of hand, and I might need to up the challenge rating level and throw in some weaknesses here and there. If you have any suggestions, I'd be happy to hear them, or you can let me know if you think I'm being way too soft of a game master and I should just let SCLRMB have all the abilities because he is such a good boy, and definitely not a horrible entity spawned from the remnants of ancient magic from a wrath-filled goddess. Alright, so now that everyone who watches me for art content and not Dungeons and Dragons content has inevitably closed the video because I've started rambling about my silly little projects and my silly little guys, let's talk about the art a bit. Like I said, drawing this image was extremely cathartic for me. I really enjoyed drawing the twisted branches and the wood grain, and like hyenas, the only long fluffy fur on this creature is on its spine, so I wasn't spending an hour drawing little locks of hair. The most stressful parts of this drawing were figuring out the anatomy of something that's halfway between a dog and a cat, and then also this patch of moss hanging from the branches up here. I was just really ticked off by it. Other than that, even though I pull out the color adjustment tools and make the screen go rave party from time to time, I pretty much stick with my original chosen color palette, which I was very pleased with, especially since I hadn't decided what color SCLRMB would be in the original drawing D&D monsters video. Even having to draw the same creature 3 times didn't irritate me. Having to draw the same drawing over and over from different positions and angles was one of the few main reasons that stopped me from getting a degree in either graphic design or architecture. So to have actually enjoyed drawing 3 SCLRMs in just a couple sittings with not even much color or style variation, I don't know, it's pretty notable for me. So as much as I love SCLRMB, I don't think SCLRMB is an appropriate name for a vicious D&D opponent, so I have a couple of ideas. First of all, a name that's a mix of the words jackal, hyena, and panther, Akalanth. It sounds very D&D appropriate, but also it's kind of just an arbitrary name that doesn't have a lot of meaning or evoke a picture like Mind Flayer or Displacer Beast. So my second idea is to call them Savaroth Scavengers, or just Scavengers, which isn't the most original name, but I feel like this is what adventurers who have found them would have called them. It feels fitting because I do imagine they slink around in the shadows and prey on animals that have already fallen, or they pursue injured prey for their food. The last name I came up with was Crow Dogs, because obviously their skull heads have beaks like crows. However, the overall shape is actually kind of like a horse skull, and there's dog teeth in there. But anyways, Crow Dogs also feels like a name that poor unfortunate adventurers who encounter these creatures might call them. But yeah, if you want to, you can let me know what you think. Akalanth, Savaroth Scavengers, or Crow Dogs. Or if SCLRMB is an acceptable name at the end of it all, or if I should come up with something else entirely. Which, if you think that, I'm not offended at all. If I'm honest, all of these names were 2 in the morning fever ideas anyways, and I might come up with something completely different for the final book anyways. The SCLRMB drawing process is an interesting one. I had to pause a lot to look up references for panthers, hyenas, all the various animals that I've mentioned throughout the video. But SCLRMB's head was pretty easy. It's mostly just somewhere between a conical or pyramidal shape, and the lighting situation is fairly straightforward. The body was where things got kind of funky. Primary reference I would definitely consider to be panthers, particularly pictures of panthers climbing down out of trees because they have all their feet tucked under them and their shoulder blades hunch up, which was a feature I felt was important to making SCLRMB look sneaky and mischievous. For the legs that were visible, I used pictures pictures of hairless Sphinx cats, just because I wanted that bony, leggy feeling to show through. I don't picture SCLRMs to be particularly buff creatures. I imagine them to have a very sinewy look, like they're clearly strong, but only have a little fat on their bodies and their muscles aren't very huge. Their muscles are instead tight and very close to the bone. I also give them less floofy paws, also very much inspired by Sphinx cats' feet, and SCLRMs have very short, sleek fur that also holds very tightly to the skin, so all the muscles or bones are very visible. I gotta say, my favorite part of drawing SCLRM had to be the ears. I didn't expect to like it so much, and it's a very minuscule part of the overall drawing, but like just drawing the ears in different positions or having the ears flatten on the head of this bottommost SCLRM, I'm not sure why, it was just very enjoyable to draw. So here I'm adding spots as a final detail on this guy. They are included in the original drawing because I was going to color them not unlike hyenas, with maybe more of a taupe or gray-brown fur, but when I colored the darkest shades in at the start, I just really loved the gray tones and decided to carry it through at the end. But I still like the choice of having the spots, and because covariation is very important for camouflage, I decided to add them anyways. And I really think they do a great job of bringing the whole animal together. Halloween is coming up very soon, and I want to know if you're celebrating, or if you're wearing a costume, or if you're just having another nice autumn day. As I said before, I'm not super well versed in the way of Halloween things, especially trick-or-treaters, because as kids we only did trick-or-treating once or twice, and it was mostly to pass out candy and not going door to door to get candy, unless it was from the 3 or 4 neighbors that we knew. And very shortly after I reached about 7 years old, we moved away from a subdivision to a much more secluded area that didn't really have enough kids or close enough buildings to do trick-or-treating. So when my husband and I moved to a subdivision after we got married, our first Halloween, I was very surprised at how much candy one actually needs to purchase in order to have enough candy to pass out to all the little children. I had done the candy shopping and had severely underestimated the amount of candy that we needed. So during breaks in the trick-or-treatings, I was running mad around the house looking for anything that could substitute for a treat. So it started with like those single serving chip bags, then Pop-Tarts and some dark chocolates that I had been saving for myself, then some Kasugai fruit gummy candies, and even Jinjin lychee jellies, which those two are snacks that I had a lot of growing up that I really liked, but hopefully it wasn't alarming to parents or, you know, children who might not be used to those kinds of candies, and also hopefully nobody discovered that they had a new allergy that they didn't know of, because that would be bad and I would feel very bad. I'm so sorry. Even with all that scrambling, we still didn't have enough candy to pass out to everyone, and we had to turn our lights out just a little bit early. So this year, I have much more candy purchased, and fingers crossed, hopefully that'll be enough to last the whole night. A few more last minute things about the drawing. Let me just say that since having tried new brushes for the 100 sub special, and by the way, we are still continuing to smash that subscriber count, and every time I mention a number in the video, it's different the next day, which still blows my mind, and I am so grateful. But back to brushes. Brush variation is a very, very cool thing. It was sort of difficult for me to get used to, and switching brushes seemed like a waste of time, but I highly recommend getting familiar with a number of different brushes and tools instead of just relying on 1 or 2 for the entire piece. Of course, this advice sort of varies piece to piece, depends on what sort of look you're going for, but honestly, adding the little oval marker brush as well as the fine liner brush has been super helpful in pushing my drawings just that little bit farther, even if it takes some time to get used to the brushes and their capabilities. I mean, if you could only see how many times I hit the undo button just to change the brush size. Here I add a little overlay of yellow and orange so that the eyes look a little more glowy in each of the SCLRMs because it's a very cool effect. Also, I take a step back from the piece and look at it and decide that I need to add a little more foliage around the border to busy the edges and help get rid of the big, awkward, chunky leaf shapes that I had there initially. And I truly think that having the extra vines hanging down that were made with the fine liner pen and the little baby leaves around the edges really just sealed the deal on me loving how this piece turned out. And here's the final piece, plus a little bonus speed draw that took me maybe 30-40 minutes that I made for Halloween of our little puppy rat lizard doing puppy rat lizard things and hanging out in a jack-o'-lantern. This was going to be my piece for this week's video, but I just wasn't in love with how it turned out, plus it was really short, but I still thought it was kind of cute, so I wanted to share it anyways. And while that's running on the side, let's talk about the SCLRMB drawing. While I do think there are some consistency errors with lighting and shading, and I do wish I took a little extra time to get this moss situation figured out, I really love how the drawing turned out. It captures exactly the vibe I wanted: haunting, bluish undertones, sort of jungle, just a pack of friends hanging out, about to get dinner, no big deal. And it has a perfect little spot to put a nice, intimidating stat block once I get that all figured out, of course. Also, clearly this pack of SCLRMBs has the ideal friend group going on. You have the mom friend who is watching over everyone, making sure things get done. You have the bold and strong friend who isn't afraid to take the lead or start fights. And you have the scrunkly friend who probably cries a lot. It's perfect. Alrighty, thank you so much for sticking around. I love you all so very much. Welcome, new subscribers. Welcome back, old subscribers. You all make me so happy and are all such kind people. I hope you all have a very happy Halloween. Whether you're spooky or not so spooky, you're all welcome here. Tune in next week when I can no longer bounce my energy off of the Halloween hype and I return to normal-ish content. Although, I suppose I don't have to. I could just keep drawing D&D monsters in November. The algorithm won't kill me for continuing, right? Who knows? Not me.